Oh boy, we are in it now. Welcome back, everybody, to Joe Patrick on Football, where I feel like I, along with a lot of other Falcons fans, are still recording this on a Tuesday morning, kind of recovering from what was such a gigantic. I mean, we use the term implosion on the the post game reaction show. Whatever that was on Sunday that the Falcons put out there against the Miami Dolphins, we're still, I think, trying to come to grips with, or at least that's how I feel. And not going to have a lot to say. I'm not going to go too much into detail about the game itself. There's not really a reason to, frankly. I feel like everybody understands what they saw on Sunday in terms of where the shortcomings were offensively and defensively for the team. I will say, with regards to the fact that the defense ultimately gives up 34 points in that game, just put in an untenable situation by the Falcons offense. And yes, for the criticisms that you can rightly have for certain players, JD Bertrand among them, not being good enough for this Falcons team, the Falcons had 30 plays in the first three quarters of football. I mean, that defense was on the field nearly constantly throughout that game to get exposed. And certainly they were ultimately, but it was really the offense that was put them in a really terrible spot. And, we had a press conference yesterday with Raheem Morris. And I gotta say, I gave Raheem a lot of credit for, as, kind of be, fulfilling, as of a couple weeks ago, kind of what the plan was for him coming in here to be the Falcons head coach in terms of making the adjustment from year one to year two on defense and giving the team and the roster what they needed on that side of the ball. And on the offensive side of the football, it just has not materialized. If anything, it's really just gotten worse over the course of time. Really, since maybe it peaked, the offense was kind of peaking middle of last year. And I come away from yesterday's press conference just really, really disappointed in Raheem himself and in the way that, in the answers basically that he gave to some of the questions. And the fact that, I just thought there was not enough accountability taken by him and by, him representing the coaching staff in general in getting these guys ready to play. I thought that he, in that press conference, kind of threw his offensive line and a lot of the players kind of under the bus. And it's not to say that those players necessarily played well. I mean, I think that, a lot of players on the offensive side of the football did not play well and probably did let down the coaching staff. But I thought that it was the head coach's responsibility yesterday in the Monday press conference to go out there and say, I'm going to be better. I know I have family members and friends who get really, really frustrated when quarterbacks, especially, who make mistakes, use the word we, like we have to take care of the ball, we have to do this, when it was the quarterback that was, making a mistake. And of course, like on interception, there could be, that is a we oftentimes because, it involves the receiver, it involves the offensive line, but there are still, I'll say, call the player out personally. Desmond Ritter, after he fumbles the ball three times against Tampa Bay, he comes out after that game in the next week's press conference and says, we have to protect the ball. We have to take care of the ball. But, well, it's like, actually, that was a you problem. It would have been better if you just said, I have to do a better job taking care of the football. And I think what I kind of wanted to hear from Raheem Morris yesterday was him say, I have to do a better job getting this team ready to play against teams like the Miami Dolphins, against any team that's coming into our house, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I need to have us better ready to play. I need to have game plans that we feel like we can execute, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted him to kind of take that accountability himself, and I just didn't really see a lot of that at all. He did at one point say that we have to be better, and that's collective, that's all of us. But that was about it as far as the accountability for what's happening on this team and on this offense is concerned. And again, I think it's kind of encapsulated by a couple quotes that I want to share with you guys. This was asked by this kind of couple question sequence was asked by my colleague at 92.9 The Game and Sports Illustrated, Garrett Chapman, who says, how do you evaluate the performance of the offensive line, which was obviously a big problem for the team on Sunday. The response, yeah, we didn't play well. We talked about it ad nauseum today. Obviously, we didn't play well at all up front. We've got to get some things going, running and pass. We didn't pass pro well. We didn't run block well. We've got to do all those things better. So we've got to go back and give those guys another week of practice to go out there and get better, because that's all you can do. And then Garrett followed up with, what do you attribute that to? And the response, we didn't play well yesterday. The guys have to go out there and play well and execute, and we didn't do it. Yesterday was a simple execution thing, and we were not able to do it yesterday. So there wasn't really an answer to that question, and I felt like that was kind of thematic of Raheem Morris's press conference in general, that there are not really any answers that he's giving. And I understand coaches are in a bit of a bind when they're being asked these types of questions, because they don't want to give up anything strategic as to like a tactical reason, why they weren't. But I feel like you can come up with something that's better than just essentially not answering the question and just saying that it's execution. Like, we know that it's execution. We saw guys getting blown up into the backfield, tripping over their own feet, knocking the ball out of their own hands. Like, we saw these things happen. But the question that Falcons fans who pay good money to watch this game, whether it's on TV or, attending Mercedes-Benz Stadium in person, I feel like they deserve better answers to some of these questions. Later in the press conference, I asked Raheem, because I felt like it just again, I'm kind of feeling this frustration. I said, did you feel like the team was prepared to win, like the coaching staff got the players ready from a game plan standpoint that they should have gone out and won that game? And Raheem Morris says, I do. I felt like we had the opportunity to go win the football game. Everybody was trying to make excuses about who we didn't have, but it really doesn't matter. You got to go out and execute the game plan that we had in place to go out there and try to win that football game. And we wanted to be able to go out there and control it with the run, be able to control it with our time of possession, do all those things that we're capable of doing. That actually protects our defense. That keeps those guys off the grass. That gives us a chance to go out there and earn a few additional special teams and win the football game. And yesterday, Miami out-Atlanted us yesterday. They got us. And I know that fans are sick of hearing that out-Atlanted, because I feel like one of the reasons why that quote, that phrase that Raheem Morris has been using, isn't taking is because I don't know that Falcons fans really understand, feel like they have a good conception of what Atlanta is, and which comes to that, this offense has not established its own identity. And Raheem Morris says it's to run the football, and it's to do those things that he was doing, control time of possession. And first of all, that's not really what I think a lot of people expected coming into the year, which was to basically be a team that tries to play keep away for the most part and not be explosive, but to basically just stay on the field and protect your own defense and allow you to win lower scoring, lower tempo, defensive style football games. That's not really kind of what the idea, I think, was of this team, but maybe it's what it's turned into because it's their best chance to win. But, that phrase, to get out-Atlanted, I think everybody's sick of it, and I think that he should probably not use it again, but we'll see, because it really doesn't explain anything. I think it just frustrates people even more. Speaking of frustration, Kurt Warner came out and made a tweet specifically about Atlanta. I kind of wondered if some of the things he talked about recently on Twitter were about the Falcons and their offense, as we have discussed on previous episodes. But he finally came out and said it. He said, I love this game and breaking down tape, but I'm struggling to watch the Atlanta offensive tape. Predictable, boring, same plays over and over. Don't like the spacing often, lots of miscommunication, just really don't get it, with a classic Kurt Warner, question marks and exclamation points at the end of his tweet. But I think that basically says a lot of what Falcons fans also are thinking and seeing. And I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I have the knowledge to be able to give answers to some of these things, but all I have to say to Kurt Warner is here. He had criticisms of Arthur Smith's play calling as well at the time, which we'll touch on in a second. But ultimately, that is how a lot of people feel. And this definitely feels like Raheem Morris is under pressure now. Like, you can see it on his face. You can kind of see it in the general body language that he has. Again, to refer back to the press conference that happened yesterday, he was talking at a very rapid pace, which he typically does. I feel like when he is uncomfortable, you see it. If you watch these press conferences, which I always recommend you do, if you watch them, you will see when the team has a loss in a post game, he's talking very, very fast. That's just how he is, and that is how he was operating when he was talking to us yesterday. He seemed very image conscious, and I think that he has to know that he is now very much kind of under fire after such a poor performance. He said it was a historic loss against Carolina, a 30-0 loss in week 3 of the season. Well, as we said in the instant reaction, there's no question that this game was even worse, even though the final score wasn't quite as bad as the 30-point deficit, at only being a 24-point deficit. It was worse than that before the Falcons scored a late garbage time touchdown, and for a lot of other reasons, it was much worse, which we'll talk about right now as we get into the offense. And it is just such a struggle. And again, to kind of go back to some of the things we were talking about, there's just no identity to this offense right now. They want to be a rushing football team. Well, they haven't had an explosive run of 10 plus yards in 9 quarters now. Since Bijan Robinson's 81-yard touchdown run against the Buffalo Bills in the second quarter of that Monday Night Football game, the Falcons have one 10-plus yard run, and it was an 11-yard run by Bijan Robinson later on in the third quarter of that game. Since then, their longest run is 8 yards between Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier. We talked about Bijan Robinson having a sub 30% success rate last week. The Falcons as a team had a 28% success rate this week. That's the 4th lowest in the Raheem Morris era. And this is coming against the worst rushing defense in the NFL at home. That is just unacceptable. And, to go back to what Raheem was saying, which was, it's not like he was wrong with what he was saying in the press conference when he was saying that we didn't play well enough up front. And we've been talking about how this offensive line has been struggling. And I've kind of referenced it more in the pass protection, where against San Francisco, you saw the offensive line not really communicating well and dealing with blitzes and stunts that Robert Saleh defense was throwing at them. And in this game, teams were just teeing off against the run and not really respecting the pass game of the Falcons. And why would you, with a receiving core that's as beleaguered as they are now, where you have Darnell Mooney as your number 1, David Sills as your number 2, and Kadero Hodge as your number 3, or maybe swap those last 2 around. But they were just manning up on the outside there and just daring the Falcons to try to beat them over the top, which Kirk Cousins was unable to do. So there's just not really any semblance of an identity or anything that this offense can really grasp onto right now. And it made me think back to 2022 under Arthur Smith. Again, this is the second of the 3 years Arthur was the head coach, and this was probably the most the least amount of talent that he had of the 3 years. That 2022 team, I mean, the preseason predictions for that Falcons team were to win 2 or maybe 3 games. They, in many media rankings before that season, they were ranked as the worst team in the NFL. That team ended up winning 7 games, and I think one of the reasons why is because for everything that they did lack, they did have an identity to what that team was. And again, they were not talented players. They were led by Marcus Mariota at quarterback. They did not have Bijan Robinson. They had Cordero Patterson and Tyler Algier as a rookie running the ball. But they were able to run the ball. By the way, Elijah Wilkinson was a starting offensive lineman for that Falcons team at left guard. Now, it's kind of funny he's at right tackle. But it made me think back to 2022 because there was a game against the Browns. The Falcons were losing 13-10, I believe in the late third quarter. And the Falcons went on a 13-play drive where they ran the ball 13 straight times and were able to run the ball down the Browns' throat and score a touchdown. And Kevin Stefanski said after that game that wore us down, that wore our defense down. The Falcons end up winning that game 23-20. And I believe it got them back to 500. I want to say at that point in the season, it was like early in the season. Um, is this team capable of doing something like that? I don't think so. I don't think so. And it's evident by the fact that they have not been able to do anything close to that these last couple of games. And this game against Miami, it felt like run, run, pass, punt. That was basically the sequence of events for a lot of the Falcons' drives in that game. And it's just it's you know I think these players are capable of it. This offensive line still has Jake Matthews, Chris Lindstrom. I mean, we've seen them run the ball effectively earlier this season, but it does feel like teams are getting a beat on what the Falcons are trying to do offensively, and the Falcons are just too slow to react. It feels like they made some considerable changes after they got off or after they lost that game to the Carolina Panthers 30-0, and kind of found something again, captured something, and came back with solid wins against the Commanders and Bills. But now they've lost it again, and they just have not reacted quick enough to be able to find something that works effectively. And I also think that has tended to happen within games as well, where they come out looking decent, looking solid in the first quarter. And again, we're just kind of talking on offense. We're just talking, they're looking solid, but then this team has the third worst offensive EPA in the second and third quarters in the NFL. And that means individually in the second and third quarter. And I would bet if you were to say combine second and third quarter, the Falcons are probably the worst, although I don't know if that's for certain. But they're the third worst offensive team in the NFL in the second quarter and in the third quarter. What does that say to me? It says that, okay, you come out, you show your game plan, and defensive coordinators are adjusting to that game plan, in the second quarter, and then when they go into halftime, they're further kind of refining those adjustments, and the Zach Robinson led scheme is just unable to adjust quick enough. And they're just, and sometimes by the fourth quarter, they're not even in the game, like what happened against the Dolphins and Panthers, frankly. So it's just a struggle, and for these reasons, I think Raheem Morris is rightfully under pressure, and it will be very interesting to see how the team responds now that they've got a really tough test coming up, going on the road to play the Patriots, who look like a playoff team at this point with a really good young quarterback in Drake May, and then going to Germany the following week to play the best team in football right now, the Indianapolis Colts. It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And, I think a lot of Falcons fans were upset that there wasn't an announcement about an actual change on the coaching staff coming out of that brutal loss, where Raheem Morris did go so far as to, make a firing after the bad loss against the Carolina Panthers. And I think one of the reasons why you're not seeing it, one, is because it's just not very feasible with, you don't have play callers if you wanted to make a change there. Often on the offensive side of the football, you just don't have that experience on the coaching staff. You just don't have a lot of places you can turn, basically, to make those kinds of changes. And I feel like that the firing the coach after a bad loss is only kind of that feels like a break glass in case of emergency type of thing. And they've already gone that route. And you can only go do that kind of thing so many times. And so for that reason, it will be very interesting to see how this team bounces back or doesn't bounce back. We will see, but they're certainly in need of trying to find themselves and find that identity, a true identity, more than I don't think that just saying we want to run the football and control time of possession is really an identity. Like, there has to be something more core, intrinsic as like part of your team that allows you to then go out and do those things. It's more like those are the results that are symptomatic of whatever it is about you as a team that allows you to be able to go out and go do that. So with that said, we're going to get out of here. Thank you guys so much for listening. You can watch the show on YouTube on 92.9 The Games YouTube channel. Just subscribe there. Or you can give this one a like if you're doing that right now and you want to see more of these. That way it'll pop up on your algorithm. A little bit more, if you want to listen to us on podcast form, just search Joe Patrick on Football on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to us there on the go in your pocket. So thank you guys so much for listening. We'll be back later this week. Talk to you then.